All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started and make sure this is, I don't even know what time it is right now.
12:11.
Okay. All right, well, thank you all for being here today. We've got Ty Wilson from Cherokees for Black Indian History Preservation Foundation. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you
It's
did.
a little bit of a tongue twister. So, before we get started, we are live streaming, so just make sure you silence your phones if you need to, or put it on off or whatever. But the restrooms are to my left out here. If you go out these doors right here, there's restrooms right here to the right. I did pass around a sign-in sheet. If you get a chance, just sign it if you want to be added to the email list. And we're excited to talk about this topic today. It's something that doesn't get a lot of exposure or get talked about very often. The Cherokee Nation, Indian tribes in general, and our history with slavery, and also what happens after the American Civil War as well. So they have their new book, Oklahoma Black Cherokees, and this was edited by Ty Wilson and Karen Cootie Cooper, who is also a Cherokee Nation citizen. I believe she moved to Florida, didn't
Yes, she did.
So, and Daniel Horse Chief, who's a wonderful artist, did the shoe boots on the front of this. So anyway, let's give a warm welcome to Ty Wilson.
Thank you. Like she said, I'm Ty Wilson. I'm the president of CBIHP Foundation. I was born in Tahlequah and I was raised on Lee Street, so I'm a Tahlequah native. This is not my thing. Me and Karen both co-edited this book, and she wrote a lot of it, and we have a lot of authors who put in and done their part, donated some material and some researched some fresh material. And I'm the lucky sucker that gets to sit up here and tell y'all about it. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank all the authors that put in. Like I said, we had Karen Cootie Cooper, who's a Cherokee Nation historian, and she done most of the hard work and dragged me along and showed me, how this was to be done and taught me a lot. So we appreciate her for doing that. At the beginning of this project, she was Miss Cooper. By the end, she's Auntie Karen. So, we love her. She's part of the family. Also, we had Daniel F. Littlefield donated a piece. Mary David Littlefield, Tia Miles, Celia Naylor, Art T. Burton, local historian Shirley Pittengale, T.L. Ballinger, Mark Harrison, George Nave, Joe Wilson, and myself. Also done a piece. Yeah, I think I got that one out the way. I'm trying to see where I'm at. As y'all can tell, I've done this a lot. I'm very good at it. Okay, well, we'll just start with the book, I suppose. Well, I told you I need to tell you about the foundation and everything. Oh, well, maybe not. We've been a foundation since 2015, And our mission statement is to preserve the Native American narrative with primary emphasis on understanding Black Indian history. And our purpose is to keep Native American history and culture alive through education, promotion, and community outreach, through sharing our knowledge, through film, literature, music, and spoken word to honor our ancestors. And the reason why this all got started is that when I moved back to Tahlequah, I started working for Cherokee Nation, and I found out that most people don't know that Black Cherokees exist and didn't know that was a thing. And I also found out that I myself didn't know a lot of my history. So between myself and my mother and my uncle Troy Wilson, we were researching some things and figured out that the elders hadn't told us a lot of our history. We was just raised knowing that we were Cherokee but couldn't prove it. We wasn't told that we could prove it and it wasn't accepted. There's a difference. So in that, we decided that we're the elders now, and you can't blame people for something you won't do yourself. So we decided to start the organization and focus on preserving our history. So that's how we got here. The book is something that me and Karen met each other when I was trying to save the Antioch Baptist Church, which was our local church growing up. And it had been abandoned by the church members. And we were trying to get it, me and Karen met doing that and discussed doing this book. And so she just dug right in and, like I said, dragged me along. So we'll just start off. I'll tell y'all a little bit about a few things in the book. Of course, I can't cover it all, so I'll pick out 3 or 4 stories. I'll let you know things about some of the Black Cherokees from the East, and of course, all the way back to Oklahoma. In some of the first accounts of interactions between blacks and Indians date back to the 1500s. In 1526, black slaves, a Spanish colony on the riverbed, escaped and lived with the Indians. And also in 1540, one of Fernando Soto's slaves helped a captive Indian chiefess escape, and they married. So black Indians is not a new thing. It's something that's been around for years, and those are the first documented proof of it. Black Indians have been a result of intermarriage, adoption into the tribe, and relationships between black slaves and their Cherokee owners also resulted in Black Cherokees. Cherokees ex-slaves known as freemen were adopted into the tribe by the 1866 treaty. Many citizens labeled as freemen also had Cherokee ancestry, but that was not recognized by the Daws Rolls. Not all freedmen had Cherokee ancestry, but all freedmen became Cherokees after that adoption. Before there was the Daws Rolls, of course, there was Black Cherokees. Great examples of this are Captain Shoe Boots and Mary Walker Elliott. There were several well-known cases of Cherokees having children with their former slaves. One was a full-blood Cherokee warrior named Shoe Boots who lived during the 18th to early 19th century. Shoe Boots was married to 3 different women during his life. The first was a Cherokee woman, the second was a white woman, and the third a former slave. His children with the white woman were automatically considered Cherokee because their father, the Cherokee, had already switched to the patrilineal descendants at the time. However, he was about when he had his kids with the former slave, he had to petition the Cherokee courts to recognize them as Cherokee so they wouldn't be doomed to a life of slavery. The court granted his request, but told him not to have any more children with his wife. And Shoe Boots, unfortunately, didn't follow the court's orders and had more children. When he died, they were sold into slavery. Some of those children end up, a couple of them end up walking the Trail of Tears to get back to Oklahoma, Oklahoma or Indian Territory at the time. Shoe Boots is the cover of our book, which was wherever it went. Is it back? But Shoe Boots is the cover of our book right here, which was donated by Daniel Horse Chief. It was already a painting that he donated to us. In that painting, that is portraying Captain Shoe Boots, his wife, and one of his kids. And of course, I'd like to thank Daniel Horse Chief for letting us use that painting. And also an example of a mixed bloods was Mary Walker Elliott. She's a mixed blood woman of Cherokee white and black heritage. She tried to enroll in the Daws Rolls in the late 19th century, but was refused when someone noted that was quoted as saying she ain't Cherokee, she's a nigger. That woman is a nigger and you're gonna put her down as a nigger. Mary and her children were barred from enrolling simply on the basis for their limited black heritage. Both Shoe Boots and Mary serve as prime examples of the time of racism that perverts the discussions of Cherokee identity. Cherokees internalize racial hierarchy, placing themselves on par with whites and blacks, anyone such as mixed bloods in a negative light. This is a part of our history where we know that the Daws Roll did not allow most blacks that could show that they had a Cherokee lineage to enroll as such. Most didn't fight this because the Daws Rolls was just for land, and as long as they were on there, most didn't bother to fight it. Not till later on was it decided to use the Daws Rolls to determine who would be in the tribe. Which gets me to the next one, not very smoothly, but I'm getting there. Black Cherokees lived in and were part of the Cherokee community, and some even prospered. A good example of that in the book is Zachary Foreman. As a freedman, a Cherokee citizen, he built a successful business and also founded the town of Foreman. In doing so, he was not only a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, in his time he was the wealthiest Cherokee in the nation, period. Black Cherokees also sat on the tribal council. We have an article in the book about that. From 1875 to 1895, there was at least 6 Black Cherokees that were labeled as freedmen that sit on the tribal council. Joseph Brown, Frank Van, Jerry Alberti, Joseph Stick Ross, Samuel Stidhams, and Ned Irons all sit on the council in those years. These men would have received substantial support from various Cherokee voters. They would have been gentlemen demonstrating intelligence and viewed as admirable examples of hardworking family men. It would have took more than just a few other Black Cherokees voting for them. Obviously, they were accepted as part of the Cherokee community and worked hard in proving they was us and helped make the Cherokee Nation what it is. That brings me to the piece I wrote about family, which I wrote a small piece about living on Lee Street. For those of you that aren't from Tahlequah, Lee Street was the last Black Cherokee neighborhood in the city of Tahlequah. It pretty much does no longer exist, but that is where I grew up. Like all Cherokee communities, it was a family-oriented place. You know, it's a community where everybody took care of each other. No, everybody didn't always get along, but everybody took care of each other, you know. So much so that most of the town perceived that we were all kin. Everybody just assumed, because when we were out, we were together, took care of each other, that all those black people have to be kin. You know, and it's sad because there's kids that won't know the joy of having a community surroundings. And I know our community's not the only one that went like that. Other communities, Cherokee communities, don't exist too, because growing up here, of course, I went to many Cherokee communities. My first wife is from Oaks. My oldest daughter's mother is from Cherry Tree. You know, we used to play. I played ball for the Kenwood basketball team for 4 or 5 years for Dick Wolf. So they took us in as family. You know, we were all the same. When you get out to the woods with other Cherokees, we were all treated the same. You know, it was, but that's because they had the same type of community that we grew up in, learning things that as I growing up had no idea, was just thinking that's what our elders taught us. I didn't know it was what all Cherokees were learning around the nation, because our people didn't discuss it. You know, once they were out of the tribe, we were still part of the community. Obviously, we lived, worked, intermarried, had children, never quit being part of the community. Just didn't understand our history. So that's why me and my organization are focused on preserving that history and teaching the kids that they belong, because that's the main thing that's lost, the sense of belonging. And when you have children that don't belong somewhere, then they find some place to belong, and it's not always someplace good. Okay, now I fumbled through some stuff. Do we have any questions?
Are you going to sell your book today?
I will sell my book today. There's one thing I did miss, I guess. I don't see it. I don't see it. Well, I was going to say that growing up, we had, of course, everybody knows about the Freedman case that just happened. Growing up, I actually knew a couple of people that are in the history books as fighting to get back into the tribe. And we lived and went to school, went to church with these people, and they never bothered to explain to the children what was going on, or make it public, or try to even tell us the history. That's why I'm big on us, teaching the children the history. Because one woman, oh dang, I wish I could find the paper. She's not in the book. But Miss Bernice Riggs actually went to church with her my whole life. She actually sued to get back in the tribe and prove she had blood lineage. But she was denied getting back into the tribe because her ancestor had died before the Daws Roll, therefore wasn't on the Daws Roll. So therefore she was denied being back into the tribe. Just because the Daws Roll doesn't say that you have Indian blood doesn't mean you don't have it. Being the American government didn't make us Indians. It was your ancestors, So, but
True that some of your family members spoke Cherokee?
yes, we had elders that dressed in hairdressers and spoke Cherokee. Our last surviving elder that spoke Cherokee that I know of just passed away like 2 weeks ago. Of course, we didn't want to learn that, so we didn't pay attention. We was like, what he's talking about. But yes.
Ty, you mentioned Mary Walker Elliott.
Yes.
Mary Walker Elliott's husband's were both Cherokees by blood. Her first husband was Thomas Fox French. I think he was a French. And the French home down by the library is where he grew up. And then her second husband was Robert Elliott, and he was a Cherokee by blood. And Mary Walker Elliott's children were kicked out of school in the 1920s in Fort Gibson because they were black. Someone had said those children are Negroes, and of course they couldn't go to school with white children, and so they kicked her kids out of school, and they had a lawsuit, and Mary actually lied in the lawsuit and said that she was enrolled by a black woman who had been taking care of her named Rachel Hicks, and that when the black woman took her in as a baby and got her on the roll, they just put them both down as black when she really wasn't black. That was totally not true. And but it convinced the judge that Mary Walker Elliott had been improperly enrolled as a freedman, and that she was actually a Cherokee Indian, which she actually was, and allowed her children to attend public schools as Cherokees, because under state law, Cherokees were white. They were considered the same as white people.
Yes.
So it's a fascinating history, and the descendants of Mary Walker Elliott to this very day refuse to accept that she was of African descent. They will only accept the story that she told in court, and that she was erroneously enrolled as a freedman, which shows you, people are willing to destroy their own family histories to avoid being classified as black. It's a really tragic history that we have.
And it's sad in America that they try to make black a race. Black is not a race, it's a description. Black people come in all forms and from all over the world. We are, me and my family, and I'm sure many others are mixed with Indian, African, and European blood, Like I like to tell people, we really didn't exist until we got here. It took the collide of those three different races or ethnicities to make what we are today. So I can't go back to Africa because I don't exist there. We're from Telequa. We're from Cherokee Nation. We've been here since, at least documented, since the 1800s. So well, send me home, send me back to the Cherokee Nation. I'm good.
Just know that this also affects not only the Cherokee tribe as citizens, but other tribes, the Creeks, the Choctaws, our five civilized tribes, which is in the same situation when it comes to freemen. And I personally don't consider them freemen because I know they are tribal members by blood that cannot be proved. My grandfather, for example, had 5 sisters, 3 of them married black men. If we were in the Daws Rolls days, and you look at my cousins, you ain't gonna say, oh, they're Creek. You're just not looking at complexion and the outside, or but their mothers are full of Creek.
Do we have any freedmen here today? Where were y'all enslaved at? Who was your master?
My grandfather was Henry Island, and his mother was Lucy Walker.
Where were you a slave at?
Well, I was never a slave. I'm a descendant.
So you were never freed. You're a descendant of a freedman.
Yeah, I'm a descendant.
You're not a freedman. You're a Cherokee citizen.
Officially, yes, in the ruling, and I think I saw you when I was coming here, and I just want to share that my daughter is out of school. This is Maya, and she didn't know she was coming, and I said, you were out of school, we were coming to get our photos, we've gone through the process. I just want to share with you all because this is my mom's sister. In 2013, my mother's in heaven now, but her spirit, I feel her presence. I just want to share this with you all because I didn't get to meet my ancestors. I just know that I have grit in me, I have a work ethic, and that's from my heritage. That's just from, I remember my grandmother working hard, but I just wasn't born then. So I'm stressing to my daughter is, you're a benefactor of lives that came before you, and the struggle and the fact that you're blessed with that, you go to school and you don't know about the segregation and all the things and the ugly history, but it's still our history. And we do have to discuss it. We do have to talk about it because in all families now, there's interracial mixing and all that. So to deny one is you're actually denying a family member that's within your family, your immediate family. But my mother started, before she passed in 2013, but in 2006, and they were allocating cards to the Cherokee freedmen, but we didn't get our paperwork in time before the litigation had happened. So it's been 11 years since 2006, and just recently for the September ruling. But when the card came in the mail, and my daughter, there's tears, I welled up because it wasn't, it's just that my mom started something that she wasn't here to be a benefactor to officially get it. But to know that we're here, and I was just overjoyed. I'm proud. I remember growing up, I lived on the East Coast, but I was born in Muskogee, Oklahoma. We used to come to Tassalagi. I still wish I had my turquoise jewelry, because that was real turquoise back in the day. But I'm just saying, I just always knew it, how you had spoken and said, I was always telling you, you're Cherokee, you got, you, and just with my mom's sister being here, and like I said, and I look around amongst all of us, and it's in the blood, but though we're different shades of exterior complexion, it's the blood. There's a bloodline, there's a connecting factor. But I am so proud to be a native Oklahoman because I was born here. I've been called an Okie. I'm an Okie from Muskogee, just whatever. But I'm just glad that the nation has made great strides in trying to, it betters everyone's life. I mean, there's a connecting factor. But like I said, I'm here, and I'm so proud that she's here, and I'm trying to get her to understand. But she's a freshman now in high school. And yes, as a benefactor, I want her to pursue, and I want her to look for ways to give back and continue to pass on, because we didn't talk about it. It was shunned, and then you hear about people not wanting to get their information out there because they don't know what's going to happen. Once you've been enslaved, you don't want to go back a slave. You like, who do I trust? Who do I talk to? What are they going to do? So, but again, I'm probably rambling, but I'm glad that you're doing this. It's a start. And then if everyone can just continue to build or share stories, I think that's how anything gets stronger. It's from connecting to other people's plights and successes in life. So I'm just glad to be a Cherokee citizen.
Welcome.
We need to know our history, but we need to understand and know in our history that we are all the same people. We are all Cherokees. We need to work together to do that. That's why our organization encompasses all Cherokees. It's not a black organization, a white organization. It's a Cherokee organization. We got to know our culture and our history in order to figure out where we're going. And we got to preserve that and instill the pride in our children. But we can't do that unless we do that together. We created something that I hope is extinct someday. I don't want this organization to be around in another 50 years. I want not have to be an organization that lets you know about the black side of Cherokee history. It's not like Cherokee history is out there a whole lot anyway, but the black part is definitely being lost. But we need to get all our history out there as a whole, because we are part of this nation. We're all Americans, and most of us in here are Cherokees, and we have to do our part to preserve that.
Tell me about that picture behind you.
This picture is of the Cooper family. She's actually not my blood granny, but she's my cousin's granny, and I was raised around her, and this would be her family, that down by 4 Mile Branch is where this picture was taken. And she was another person her family was put down as freedmen, and her family was never slaves. They were free blacks that were here and got wrongly put down as freedmen. And as you could see, they are a mixed family. But she looks like she's a full blood. Her and her husband. She's not in this picture. It's a couple of generations before, and she was one of the people that helped us get the foundation started. but all her life, you know, she was called the squaw and talked about on both sides because she was dark in an Indian and light in a black person, and she just caught it from all sides. But most people see her and just think she's full-blood. She has to tell people that she's black. As a matter of fact, when my first wife first met her, she looked at me and she's like, well, it was her and her husband. They were both looked like they were full-bloods, but he was a Cherokee. I think he's Choctaw or something. But anyway, it was a birthday party, and she was like, well, who are those Indian people that was there? We was on our way home, and I'm like, who are you talking about? You know, I'm like, what they do to people, you know, because I've been around my whole life. I never took a second look or thought about it. And we went round and round. She just explained to me, and I was like, oh, Granny and Gene Coulter. You know, I was like, yeah, they Indian, but they black. She's like, oh, okay. So y'all are Cherokee? I'm like, well, yeah. You know. After that, when we moved to Texas, of course, we'd always get she was white. She was a white Cherokee, and me being a black Cherokee. We would always get oh, y'all are an interracial couple. She'd be like, no, we're both from the same tribe.
So, the Eastern Cherokees, they own slaves. Is that
Yes,
correct?
and the
Okay.
slaves walked the Trail of Tears. And
So that was what I was wondering. So
Now, are
when
you talking about the Eastern Band of Cherokee?
yes,
They did not own slaves.
they didn't.
No.
Okay.
No, but they did fight for the Confederacy.
the Eastern Cherokees did own slaves.
Cherokees in the East did.
Yes.
The Eastern Band.
Oh, not the band.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
No,
okay,
no.
yeah, Cherokees in the east. So
Right.
prior to the Trail of Tears,
Right.
Yes.
the Cherokees did own slaves.
Yes.
So, did they bring the slaves with them on the Trail of Tears?
They brought the slaves on the Trail of Tears, and there was also free blacks that came on the Trail of Tears with them also.
There's a author right now, Cooper, I can't remember his first name, who's researching to find some of the names of the individuals who actually did come on the Trail of Tears. They're on the Henderson roll, the 1835 Henderson roll. It identifies the head of the household, and then tells how many children or how many people were in the household, and then it gives a list of their property, and their slaves are simply identified as property, not by name. But if you add all of those up, there were about 1,500 who came west on the Trail of Tears. If all of those people survived from 1835 to 39 to come west. The thing about those persons who came west on the Trail of Tears, they're the core or base population of the freedmen that exist today. But there were other populations brought in. There were slave owners who went down to Louisiana and purchased slaves and brought them into the Cherokee Nation. We have an example of Robin Weber, who was a full-blood Cherokee Indian slave owner, and he would go down to Louisiana, purchase black women, bring them onto his plantation and impregnate them and sell his own children. And so there's lots of examples of that kind of behavior. And we also have mixed Cherokee blacks who have come west on the Trail of Tears that they might have been classified at that time as free blacks, but some of them were citizens of the nation. The Gertie family are descendants of a gentleman who in the 1841 claims is identified by Jesse Bushyhead, who was a pastor and very active spiritual man, identified the Gertie man as being of white, Negro, and Cherokee descent. So there was mixing going on long before the Trail of Tears. So, but many of those families, and the Gerties are a good example of that, they married full-bloods after they got here. And so by the time the Daws Roll is made, they're on the Daws Roll as full-bloods. But they're really not full-bloods. They have white and African ancestry. And there's lots of families like that. Lots and lots of them. I mean to hog the time.
Oh, no, go ahead. There.
When did Cherokee Nation start
Adopting black slaves. The
You want me to answer that?
yes, it was what's her name? Got the first slave. Go ahead.
Molly was the first known black person who had been a slave adopted into the Cherokee Nation. She was brought into the Cherokee Nation in 1876 by a white man named Sam Dent, who had murdered his Cherokee wife. Her clan, the Deer Clan, were going to take retribution on him and kill him. And so he fled the nation, purchased a young 14-year-old black girl, brought her into the nation. The Deer Clan met. They agreed that they would take her. Of course, you don't hear her name. And then she became a Cherokee. And in the process of adopting her, they gave her the Cherokee name Chickayu, which means beloved. She was beloved. She had replaced a valuable member of the Deer Clan community. Well, we would not know anything about Molly or Chickayu as she became known, except for the fact that in 1833, as an old woman in her late 60s, Molly Dent, the daughter of Sam Dent, came into the Cherokee Nation and claimed Molly as her slave. She said, my father didn't have my permission, that she was my slave, and he didn't have my permission to give her away. And so she filed a lawsuit in Cherokee court, and the Cherokee courts heard the arguments that Georgia law says that this, and this about this slave, and not only would she be a slave, but then her children and her grandchildren would be enslaved if she were sent back with Molly Dent. And so the Cherokee court took testimony from members of the Deer Clan, including Chief Whitepath and Stan Wadey. And both of those men testified that Molly was their sister. That's how clans saw each other in that day. They didn't say anything about her being a Negro. They didn't say anything about her color. They didn't say anything of that nature. They said, our sister, who has ever been a native Cherokee, it would be an injustice, not only to her to be carried away into slavery, but also to the Deer Clan and the Cherokee Nation, because she is a citizen of this nation by adoption in the Deer Clan. And so the Cherokee court ruled in favor of Chickayu, and that she would be a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, that the adoption by the Deer Clan would perfected her citizenship, and not only hers, but also that of her children. And how many of you are familiar with the Tucker family over in Oaks? They are her descendants. They are on the roll as full-bloods, but they're not. They are descendants of Chickayu, who became a Cherokee.
Yes.
My name is Shirley Pratt, and I'm here to share what I just received this last September. It is the first family of Cherokee Nation I've attended on friends. And if anybody would like to know, I'm very proud of this accomplishment. I don't know it, but I got it nevertheless. So, my grandmother is Anna Ross. She raised me. My mom had me at 18. She got married, so my grandmother took care of me. My grandmother's father is Samuel Ross, and his father is Joseph Ross, and then his father is Isaac Ross. And now they have two photos in the room, in the kitchen of my ancestors. And I'm so and hope that I inspire other descendants of Cleveland to get there.
Well, I think it's important too to note that that individual, Isaac Ross, was living in the Cherokee Nation prior to the Trail of Tears. And so she is one of the very few of the Cherokee freedmen who can actually identify one of those 1,500 individuals who came west with the Cherokees. And I will say this, that we, as Cherokee Indians, we hold tightly to the Trail of Tears. That is our primary tragic event in our history. But we weren't there alone. We weren't there just us. There were 1,500 individuals who came with us. We believe 1,500, but those people, the slaves, carried the luggage, built the campfires, protected from wolves. They helped us survive. Yeah, so we cannot, in good conscience, anymore simply say the Trail of Tears just belongs to us. It belongs to everybody who came on the trail, and that includes those descendants of slaves, even though we don't know their names. And I'm just proud as punch checking for you that you have an ancestor that you can say that person came on the trail. That's really special.
You say they're documented on the Henderson Road
Yes, they're documented as property.
as property?
Uh-huh.
They weren't even considered as humans.
They weren't even considered human beings. And, you know, of course, the roll was made by a white man, Henderson. And so he put people on there in the way that his mind conceptualized. We can't transliterate that to how those Cherokees saw those individuals. They may have seen them as more people. They may have, you know, I mean, who knows? We can't put our thoughts into their heads. But what we can do is simply look at that document and say 1,500 living human beings came west on the Trail of Tears and have been ignored for over 175 years. It's time to stop that.
Yes.
I had a question about, like, why was they called civilized 5 tribes?
They adopted the ways of the white man.
Slavery was one of them.
Yes, so slavery being one.
Slavery was considered a way, if you could get them to become farmers, then they would no longer want to hunt, and then they would also no longer want to fight. They wanted to settle them down. And so brought a lot of slavery to the Cherokee Nation. These white men marrying Cherokee women, and they would bring slaves with them. And so Nancy Ward, I think, is the very first, and the two of us here we're cousins. We're descendants
Yes,
of Nancy
Nancy Ward was the first
and
one
she
to
was
have
the
a
first
slave.
slave owner in
Yes.
the Cherokee Nation. She was awarded a slave as part of doing some brave deed.
And you have to remember it was only like 10% or less than 10% of the Cherokee Nation that owned slaves. And Native Americans had been enslaved by the white man before they brought the Indians, and after. It didn't completely stop. People think it did, but there were still Indian slaves in too. So you have to think at one point in time, blacks and Indians were enslaved side by side. And we know what happens when people live together.
That wasn't the Cherokee Nation that adopted slavery. It was just the people, right? Individuals.
Initially, you could say that, but as the institution of slavery began to grow and develop in the Cherokee Nation, it became institutionalized by the tribal government.
Yes, there were laws
by the
made.
time the 1839 Constitution was adopted, there was already a very robust slave code. The Cherokees had restricted the movement of slaves. They had restricted educating slaves. Many of the things you see in the South that were imposed upon slaves also were imposed upon them in the Cherokee Nation. And in the 1840s, the Cherokees had one of the most robust slave codes of any of the 5 civilized tribes. And intermarriage was forbidden. Children of black women, of slave women were slaves. So anybody that had African ancestry couldn't serve in tribal government. So there were lots of laws passed to control the movement of slaves. There was actually a slave rebellion in the Cherokee Nation, and a bunch of slaves broke away and ran off, and I think they were headed to New Mexico.
Yes.
And I don't think they got there, or I don't think all of them did.
They didn't make it.
Yeah,
They made
but,
it across the Red River.
But one of the most interesting things about the attitude of Cherokees towards persons of African descent is the story of the little black girls who were taken into slavery by slave catchers from Missouri. And I think David Landrum was the sheriff, and these girls were citizens of the Cherokee Nation by blood. They were of African descent, but they were by blood citizens. But they were captured by slavers and taken to Missouri. The majority of the people in the community simply said, "Nah, that's just 2 less black people in the community." They really didn't care. David Landrum, and I may be having his first name wrong, and I apologize if that's the case, but I know his last name was Landrum. He was the sheriff, and he wasn't having it. He said, "These are Cherokees. We're going to go get those girls." And so he got together a posse, and they went up into Missouri and caught up with the slave catchers and got those girls back and brought them back to the nation. And you can read about that story in Celia Naylor's book, African Cherokees. It's an excellent book. But there are so many stories of the interrelationships of Cherokees and blacks in the Cherokee Nation. And I think one of the difficulties that we have right now in this tribe after the ruling that came down on the freedmen is the amount of lack of knowledge that people have about those relationships, about how long and how intimate and how close we have always been. And we've had 25 years of separation since 1983 when Ross Swimmer first kicked the freedmen out. And so that's a generation and a half. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. And I think we can do that. I think as a people, we can all come together. We can strengthen one another. As you were talking about, it's time for us to all just move ahead. It's a done deal. Let's let it go and move on, and work together.
And that Celia Naylor story is in this book too. We did put that in here. And like you were saying, it's only been since the 80s or so. The straight thing about that is, like me, most of my kids are on the by blood side because of their mother. So if the Daws Rolls was to be today, where would they land, Yeah, think of it like that. Even back then, where would they land? So it's yes, ma'am.
Like David and I are relatives through our Indian bloodline, but because of my skin color and my family, they were not accepted to where, David's side is, and then you have proof of it, and you take it there, and they say, well, no, that's not what it is. And, it's been talked about, that's how you know, and you can trace it all the way back. So, it's kind of like, I don't know if it's what you would say, a slap in the face, but then you turn around and you look at somebody else and you're saying, well, I'm just going to embrace my culture because I know who I am. It doesn't matter what's put on paper because I know, and we've been raised here. I'm from Fort Gibson in the little 4 Mile area, but we came up, we played softball, and you did all these things with people that are different, but yet still the same. And so that's what makes a community. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. It's where you live and what you did as a whole. And that's what we want to do now, is to come back as a whole. Because if you try to cut out one part, the whole body is going to limp. So we want to be whole.
I agree.
Pretty much.
Telling these people this isn't accurate. I've got your book, and you're going to sign it for me.
Yes, I have some more books up here if anybody wants
Another
one.
good book that my wife and I are reading about the Osage Indians. If you're familiar with that and how they were done.
How much is your book?
$22.
And I hope we don't get that, but they were done awful.
that the killers of the
Yes.
flower moon?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Well, that happened in the Cherokee Nation too. There were lots of incidences of that sort of behavior. And you know, the interesting thing that we're going to have to address that is the fallout from the restoration of freedmen to citizenship is the question of the 1907 Act, which removed the protections from freedmen allotments. That was a racist attempt by the federal government to open land in Indian Territory, and then Oklahoma, to white settlement. And so the freedmen were the first to lose their protections. Why is that?
Wow.
Well, we know why. So that's going to have to be addressed. That's something that has been ignored since 1907, 110 years. And it's time we looked at that. There are lots and lots of issues and opportunities that this provides for us. But the restoration of the rights of the Cherokee Nation as a government, as a people, all of us together, can move ahead now because the freedmen have been brought home.
Anybody else? Quick question?
I have a question. I'm so confused. So between 1492 and the late 1700s, there was no record of a black citizen via blood law. Not by blood, but by blood law in the Cherokee Nation. She was the first one.
First one that we know of.
That we know of. Now, that seems strange based upon some of the other tribal practices from the southeast, doesn't it?
Not considering that even Cherokees by blood have a difficult time getting into the mid-1700s with their own genealogy.
Okay, so
it's a byproduct of just simply when the record started.
So it's highly unlikely that she was the first.
I just can't even go there. It's just not possible to say whether she was or wasn't. She is just the first that we know of.
When was blacks shipped over here?
Yeah, I'm sure she wasn't the first black to intermarry because Jack Gertie, who is the person I mentioned earlier, he was already in his 40s, in 1840, and so his parents had to have married in 1790, something like that, and he wasn't young. They're the oldest of their children.
Now, didn't that somewhat break with tradition? Because if she was adopted as a citizen into the tribe, which is a poor term, adopted, that's not the right term, I don't know what term. Why wouldn't she have gone to the Long-Hair clan? I mean, I know that the Deer clan needed
Because that's a
preparation.
myth.
So that's a myth.
Yeah, that's a myth. That the Long-Hair clan is the clan of strangers.
So it could,
That's one of our, that's lore, but that is not how it always works.
so that's
No,
not.
any clan could adopt.
Okay.
Any clan could adopt. And the Deer clan adopted her under circumstances that I described. And the Cherokee court in 1833 found that her adoption to the Deer clan had perfected her citizenship.
But at
and was binding
1833,
on the nation.
she would have been considered just a full-blood citizen, even though, I mean.
Right, right.
Period.
She was a full-blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. She wasn't an Indian. She wasn't an Indian, but the Cherokees at that time didn't see things that way.
She was a Cherokee citizen.
They saw her as a member of the Deer clan and a citizen of the Cherokee Nation.
And had the Daws Rolls happened the day after that, she would have been listed as a full-blood.
Well, it depends on who's making the roll, because the rolls, of course, are made by white people, and their perception of what they're looking at has nothing to do with what we believe.
But they could have certainly listed her as a full-blood based upon the criteria they were.
Yes, that is, they could have. And it would have been how the Cherokees would have seen her probably too. They would have come to her defense again, and if they tried to put her on there as a black person or not allow her to roll, they probably would have stepped up and said, hey, wait, this is our girl. She's with us.
1808, was that when they started putting the claim system?
Yeah, that's pretty much whenever they started passing laws to dismantle it. The blood law was taken away. It started falling apart.
We have a live stream going on, that's why I'm running around trying to make sure that they can hear the questions on the live stream. So, in case you're wondering why I'm running around.
I have
his name, from his Indian name to his name now, and she doesn't know what the name was. It's changed it from. How did she go about finding that out?
Well, all I can tell you, I'm a professional genealogist. I have a contract with the Cherokee Nation. I've been doing this kind of research for over 30 years. And all I can tell you is that you just have to look at the records. Sometimes there's a brick wall you come up against and you just can't get through it. If I saw her records, I might be able to give her some advice, but without seeing them, I really can't tell you, where we would need to go with that.
This Saturday, we are hosting a Know Your History Symposium, and we will have genealogists there. This will be here in Tahlequah at the Senior Citizen Center.
It is
The
located,
address.
there's an address on the flyer. I gave her a flyer.
Oh, okay. Yes, that'll be this Saturday from 12 to 3.
Can you say the address for those that are watching on the live stream? Can you say the address?
What's the address?
There you go. Think about
Here's
it.
the flyer. The address is 230 East 1st Street.
It's located behind,
No, here in Tahlequah, 230 East 1st Street here in Tahlequah. It's
it's located behind where the Aaron's furniture store is. Let's see.
you turn right or turn, what direction is that? East on 1st and Muskogee.
Yeah.
And it's up a couple of blocks.
They used to get the driver's license.
Yeah, it's the building where they used to do driver's license tests. It's now the Senior Citizens Building.
But we'll have, genealogists.
No, there's some consultants.
No, but we'll have, we're gonna have genealogists there though from NSU, I think some from the Heritage Center may be coming. I don't know if they've confirmed yet, but we're gonna have different people there that can, sit down with you, make an appointment to and see what you need to bring and that kind of thing. And then we'll also have, all the forms that people need to either update their information at Cherokee Nation, to apply for citizenship, to register to vote. We'll have all those forms and help you fill those out. So, and tell you where to take them and all that good stuff. So we're just trying to help people get acclimated to all of the processes, I guess.
And if any of you know someone who has an application pending that came in between 2006 and the present, make sure that they have updated their addresses. We have sent out over 1,000 pieces of mail, and probably 900 of those pieces of mail have returned as bad addresses. So we want to make sure that those freedmen descendants who have active applications on file can be processed, so we have to know where you are. And so pass the word out that we need current addresses. And there's a form on cherokee.org that you can amend your address and get that corrected.
For those that you don't know, the chief and our administration are giving a welcome dinner in Muskogee on October the 27th from 6 to 8 at the Three Rivers Clinic in Muskogee. Dinner, all of our departments will be there with information of what services are available, eligibility criteria, and the chief, the deputy chief, and our Secretary of State, elected officials or council will be there to welcome you to the tribe.
You do have to RSVP.
You do, yes, to Miss Glenda McMillan. Yes.
McMahon.
Yes.
Linda McMahon.
But just for, we're unaware.
Okay, well, thank y'all for having me.
So for those that got the wrong email at first, I sent a retraction later yesterday. I've been at the College here